Welcome to Draft Central, powered by Rookie Me's 2020 pre-draft coverage. Today we're going to be discussing one of the most controversial and one of the most confusing aspects of the draft, the bidding system. I'm joined by Michael Alvaro and Peter Williams, who will be discussing what the bidding system entails and how it impacts this year's draft, considering there are so many next generation academy prospects.
Yeah, it's going to be a interesting time, I think, for sort of clubs, players and fans alike, because it's going to be more complicated than previous years. We've sort of had a bit of a warm-up in prior years, I feel. This year it's going to get a real workout because we've got so many players, even not only just overall that are attached to clubs, but also players that are potentially in that top 10 range that are attached to clubs. And we're going to see a lot of sort of bidding throughout this draft. And look, it certainly is confusing and can sort of it's hard to wrap your head around it. There's the basic premise that a lot of people get, but we thought we'd just go into a bit of detail and sort of explain that a bit more, Michael.
Absolutely. And I mean, please don't be too upset if you're getting confused halfway through the draft and, you thought your club had one pick, but now it's up or down the order. I mean, it happens to the best of us. Pete's a lot better than I am at this sort of thing. So hopefully we can help you through a few scenarios and better clarify what could happen on draft night.
The first scenario we have is with likely top 2 pick Jamarra UGLE-HAGAN'S, who is tied to the Western Bulldogs as a next generation academy pick. What impact does this have on the Western Bulldogs if a bid comes in for Jamarra UGLE-HAGAN'S within the first 1 to 2 selections?
Well, it's very interesting because we saw the Bulldogs make a trade the other day to get some extra points in, and what that allowed them to do is to have enough points that if Adelaide was to potentially make a bid on Jamarra, that the Bulldogs would be able to match without going into deficit. So we'll talk about deficit a bit later, but basically what it is, it means that regardless if Jamarra's bid on pick 1, pick 2 or pick 3, they're going to match. Now with each pick, the amount that they need to match in terms of draft value points is lower, so therefore they use less picks to match basically. So it's quite an interesting sort of, addition to the draft system over the last few years. But Michael, I know you wrote a bit about Jamarra in the Western Bulldogs preview and sort of what they would need to do to potentially match the bid.
Yeah, I mean, Siobhan sort of pegged him as that 1 to 2 range. He could even be extended out to 3 because Sydney, I know, have committed to making a bid with their pick if he gets all the way through. But yeah, I mean, there's sort of 3 likely scenarios. Obviously, Adelaide, as we mentioned, could bid with pick 1. That would effectively wipe out all of their remaining picks, and it would leave them with something around pick 66, which obviously isn't of great value, but that's on the sort of remaining points that they would have. If the bid comes in at pick 2 with North Melbourne, that effectively wipes out their first 4 picks in the draft. And then they slide back down to pick 73 and still hold on to their sort of 2 remaining picks that they originally had. It's pretty similar with pick 3, except they get, that leftovers are a bit more valuable. So they get something in between their, leftover picks there. I think something around the pick 54 mark. So they'd have 3 consecutive within the 50s after having the first 4 knocked out. So hopefully I'll explain that all right. But I guess to summarise, if it goes pick 1, then they'll have all their picks wiped out and they'll get 1 remainder. If it happens at pick 2 or 3, their first 4 picks get wiped out. But yeah, obviously the remainders will be a bit higher from pick 3 rather than pick 2. So
I think the easiest way is sort of looking at that 4th pick and going, it disappears if it's with pick 1, it slides to pick 73 if it's with pick 2, and it slides to pick 54 if it's with pick 3. So that's what the Bulldogs are roughly looking at with a bid. So it just means you're going to lose those picks, but basically it'll be either pick 54 at best, because we know they're going to bid with pick 3. If it's pick 2, it's 73, which I think's a high chance of going then. And then effectively it pretty much gets wiped out prior to that. So it's going to be an interesting time, but certainly it's a perfect example because we know that he's going to earn a bid in those first few picks. So he's the most interesting case to sort of look at.
The Sydney Swans also face a bidding challenge with two top midfielders from the Sydney Swans Academy in Errol Goulden and Braden Campbell going into the draft. Now, with the Sydney Swans, what scenario are they facing? We know Campbell is very highly rated and Goulden is rated somewhere in the top 30 as well. So how would they match a bid and how would that affect them?
Yeah, so we think that, Sydney will end up coming out with pick 3 and then Campbell and Goulden. So Campbell's obviously one who's been rated in the top 10 and he's likely going to attract a bid within those picks. Then you look at Goulden, he could be one to be bid on in the first round, but more likely sort of in the 20s in the second round. So, that's their value, Pete. What are the sort of scenarios that we're throwing up here and where are their picks going to fall afterwards?
Yeah, see, and this is where it gets a little more tricky for the teams that have more than one, because one you can easily calculate, but particularly when you've already had someone that's been bid. So we know by the time that Sydney receive a bid on Braden Campbell that Jamari UGLE-HAGAN will already be off the board. So that's already a pick before. So their pick 3 becomes pick 4. So already that drops down, which actually, if you're thinking about it, not a lot of people think about it, but that actually means that Sydney won't receive a bid before pick 5, that means, because therefore the points value drops and they have less to match, which really helps out, because even if they were to be bid at pick 5, it's a lot less points, like 1502 compared to 1627, so that's already 125 less points they have to make up, which is usually a pick in sort of those 60s range. So already that's one less pick effectively they've got to match it with. If it comes in at pick 4, then it means that picks 32 and 35 both go, and it should be noted that these picks have been moved up from their 34 and 37 because of the UGLE-HAGAN bid, and therefore the Bulldogs picks have been removed. So that's why they're at picks 32, 35. So they will both go, with pick 40 also covering it, and it goes 32.6 points over. So it means that pick 40 goes to 71. So if you're a Sydney fan, say you just picked up a player with what will be pick 4, so therefore the bid comes next, you'll end up, the 32 and 35 will go and the pick 40 will just drop down to the 70s. So that'll be effectively what you end up having, which will leave you with picks 41, 52 and 71. So that just gives you a couple of mid-range picks, still leaves you in that sort of ballpark for the next person we're going to talk about, Errol Goulden, and obviously still have that later pick with 71. So, Michael, where do you sort of anticipate a bid for Goulden might come in?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a few clubs in the market for that sort of small forward or creative link, hard runner between the arcs. So, I mean, I'd have him sort of rated around the 20 mark. I know that was his spot in our power rankings. So, anywhere sort of between 20 and 25 I think is realistic. May even slide even further given the sort of bidding process. Some clubs might not just be keen to do that given they know they're not going to get their hands on him anyway. So, he could slide, but I definitely know that his value is probably a bit greater than what it might end up on the night.
And what's interesting is, of course, when it comes to Goulden, we know that by that stage, we know UGLE-HAGAN'S off the board. We know Campbell will be off the board. We'll know Lockie Jones will be off the board. We know Reef McInnes will be off the board. So that's already those off the board. Blake Coleman could be off the board. So what that means is that they're currently the picks that they had. Again, we're assuming that Braden Campbell was picked with that sort of pick 5 or matched with that pick 5. Their picks 41, 52 and 71 will, of course, go up. So potentially 5 picks could be removed prior to their 41. So that would mean effectively they go up to sort of pick 36. So what that means is, let's hypothetically say that happens, they end up with picks 36, 46 and 64, for example. All of a sudden, because of those moves and the other players that have been bid on, the Swans currently have 968 points. Now that's the equivalent of pick 14. So what that means is, technically, if a bid came in at pick 14, they would be able to match. But obviously, we're not saying that because some of the other players would have gone by then. We're going to put in a hypothetical scenario. Say the bid comes in at pick 24. So if the bid comes in at pick 24, that's worth 588 points. That means they effectively give up 36 and pick 46 slides to 53. So, and in that time, pick 64 has moved up 2 spots because 2 of those picks have been removed. So basically, to save a whole heap of time, if Braden Campbell goes at pick 4 and Errol Goulden goes at, say, pick 24, it means Sydney will end up with both of those, plus whoever they pick with their first selection, and still have 53 and 62 in the bank. So that's a pretty good scenario for Sydney. They've been able to trade in picks, do enough to be able to allow for worst case scenarios. And even if a GULDEN bid technically came in the top 20, they'll be able to match it under the scenario. So it's quite good news for Sydney fans. And I think it really does depend. And they're a perfect example of where the bidding might get a little confusing, because obviously if Campbell drops a bit, then that's more points for GULDEN. And if GULDEN drops, then they'll have higher picks at the back end. But that's just one example of a scenario how the bidding system works for two players.
Looks like Sydney are going to walk away with a very nice draft haul. Another club that faces the challenge of having two academy prospects and matching bids for those players is the Fremantle Dockers, who have their players in Braden Walker and Joel Weston that are both next generation academy players. How does that scenario play out for bids on those two players for Fremantle?
Yes, that's Brendan Walker and Joel Weston, obviously probably around the sort of 25 to 30 mark in our power rankings as far as that goes, but they're ones who could well slide a little bit. We're probably expecting maybe one of the players to be bid on before Fremantle's pick 32, I believe is what they have at the moment. Yeah. So, depending on where that sort of falls with other academy bids, they could well have to match one and have a few of their picks taken off the board. So, Pete, what do you reckon the sort of best case scenario is for Fremantle going in?
Yeah, so Fremantle, as we sort of mentioned off the top, did a trade with Adelaide, which was able to get a few of the picks in. And that way they were able to get some extra points at the back end. Not necessarily to draft players, but just to cover themselves if a couple of earlier bids were to come in. And we've sort of said previously that if they get a couple of bids around that top 30 mark, they'll be able to match them if they choose to. So there won't be a problem there. We know that Fremantle have that higher pick, which they could well use to trade up. Obviously, it's around 12 at the moment, but could well use to trade up or potentially trade down, depending if they feel the bid's going to come later. So in terms of what Fremantle have, obviously they'll use that pick. And we know that their second pick, which was at 32, will move up at least 4 picks. Again, that's knowing the players that have been taken already through the bidding system. So therefore, the Bulldogs, your Collingwood, Sydney, Brisbane, etc., their picks will be off the board. So we'll say they move up 4 spots. It means they move up to pick 28. And therefore, while their later picks move up as much as 8 or 9 spots, basically, which means it could end up with picks 47 and 48 as well as 55. So that's their later selections, which were in the mid-50s. Basically, what it means is before even a bid is placed, the Dockers have around 1,502 points. So what it means is if a bid comes in at about pick 25, which is about fair value for one of them, it could well be Joel Weston as an example, then potentially that means they'll lose pick 46, and then therefore their 47 will slide back. So basically what that would mean is they're able to match that bid and still have enough picks at the back end. So Fremantle would be able to then easily match with one of the other selections in terms of, Brandon Walker coming through and still end up with, say, picks 52, 63 and 71. Which is a great idea why Adelaide was so crucial, that trade that they did with them. So basically what it means is they've got the ability, if it does come before their second pick, then obviously it would just wipe out that selection for one of them. If it comes after it, they've got enough picks in that back end to be able to match, which is very important for Fremantle to be able to do. And they may well try and split a pick back there if they have their eye on someone else. So all in all, like if we're looking at it, obviously similar to Sydney, they've got the chips to be able to do it. It doesn't mean like if a pick came in the top 20, which is unlikely, then obviously it would be a bit more of a struggle, but they'd be able to make it work. So it would be quite interesting again if they would match that. But certainly in the range that we sort of see, I sort of feel that with the teams, they're able to match their current bids. Which is important. So, I think Fremantle, along with Sydney, would be able to match them and have some loose change at the back end.
We hope that we've been able to describe the bidding system and the process that it undergoes on draft night, well, especially for those that are supporters of the Western Bulldogs, Sydney Swans and Fremantle Dockers. Make sure that you tune in to Draft Central's comprehensive round-by-round coverage, expert analysis and answering of your questions from 6 p.m. on draft night. Thank you.